Oh boy. And I have a little bit left here too. I have -2 grams. It's like -1 gram. Something is definitely wrong. Hello and welcome back to my channel and to my knitting podcast series. I am so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Samantha and I am the knitter and knitwear designer behind the Strikkechick. Oh boy. What? No! Okay, I know I said I was done with drops air, but I did save this because if you saw my last video about how I had this yarn in my stash and then I swatched it for what is now the Tuscan sweater, which I haven't shown you yet actually. I don't know, I'm kind of keeping the big reveal maybe for the next podcast, but stay tuned. I might put like a little snippet of the lace here because I'm just so excited about it, but I promise I will talk about it in the next podcast episode. It worked up quite fast. It was kind of like a sneaky, I showed you a swatch and now it's a full sweater. And that's partly because I took it as my airport knitting project when I went to London, and so it flew right by. And the goal of this, right, was like, I looked at my stash and I was like, oh, let's clear out some of my stash. And I had this yarn in my stash, these 2 skeins. And now the yarn that I have in my stash currently is those 2 skeins plus, if I can untangle it from my belt, this. So this is the net accumulation to my stash in my attempt to deplete my stash, which is essentially the story of my life, you guys. This is how that works because I was like, I don't know how much yarn I'll need for this sweater. Let's just buy 6 skeins of drops air and like 5 skeins of kid silk, and then it ended up being way, way less, and here I am now regretting all of my life decisions. So I wanted to show you these together because I love the yarn combination for the Tuscan sweater. I love how when the sunlight hits it, it looks golden. It's so gorgeous. And so when I'm making a project from my leftover yarns, I definitely want to continue holding these together. And because I have the same amount, I think I'll have some kid silk left over at the end because I think the meterage on the kid silk is slightly more than the drops air. This has like 210 meters in one skein and drops air has 150. So I am gonna end up with leftover mohair even if I do use up all of my drops air, which is not very likely, I think. But I do have, this is 1, 2, 3 skeins now. These were full skeins, so I'm just gonna leave them as full skeins because I can't weigh them. There's still a swatch on it. But I do have 3 full skeins of drops air in clay. And then I have a little bit of leftover drops air that's kind of tangled with the kid silk. And then I have 1, 2, 3 full skeins of kid silk. And this little bit of kid silk left, which I have learned in kid silk, this doesn't look like much, does it? But this will actually get you like a whole vest, like this thing by itself. So this is quite a lot more than it looks like. But what I was planning on doing maybe was making like a capelet or something, like, you know, one of those like things that just kind of warms. It's kind of like a cowl, but it's just a bit bigger, and it sits around your shoulders, and it kind of looks like that. I don't know. Part of me is like, do I make a vest? Because this is definitely vest quantity. Do I make like a big scarf? Because I can make like a big chunky scarf out of it. I don't want to, I say waste, I don't want to waste it on something small like a pair of mittens or a hat, because that won't really I have such a high volume of this yarn, I want to use it on a bigger project. It won't get me a sweater, unfortunately, and this is when I kind of wish that we had children so I could like knit a like little kid sweater and then we could match. I could match. Oh, that would be adorable. But that's not gonna happen. So I'm thinking maybe a big scarf, maybe like a nice big scarf with like a lace motif on it would be really pretty. I could probably get like a you know, like a square shawl thing out of it if I wanted to do that instead. So if you have any ideas on what to do with kind of a fairly large chunk of this leftover yarn, it works up on 7mm needles quite well, so it will be like a quick knit. Let me know, because I would absolutely love to make something larger with all of this scrap yarn that I have. It's not even scrap yarn. I don't think you can call this scrap yarn if you have 3 full skeins of mohair. That's a sweater quantity of mohair, for me at least. So I think the limiting factor here is the drops air. I think it's just the fact that I don't have enough for a full sweater. Maybe it's enough for a cropped sweater. I'm kind of hesitant to use the same yarn combination again for another sweater, but I loved it so much, maybe I will. Maybe I'll just make like, I don't know. Yeah, please let me know. I'm very stumped, and honestly, I would love to know what you guys think. So I'm just gonna go ahead and measure these little blobs to see how much kind of extra yarn I have in addition to my full skeins. So that's 16 grams of drops air and 4 grams of kid silk. So drops air, and then this is the shade Rose Clay. I want to say Rose Clay and not just clay, but I could be wrong. It could just be clay. And I have 1, 2, 3, so that's like 150 grams plus 16, so that is, I'm going to expose how bad I am at doing math in front of all of you. It's 166. And then drops kid silk in the shade Almond. I remember that one. And it is, each one of these is 25 grams, so that's 75 plus 4 is 79 grams of drops kid silk. So yeah, this is quite a bit, and I'm very, very excited. I think I'm going to take a bit of a break before I work with it, so feel free to like let those suggestions keep rolling in, because I just finished a sweater with this yarn combination, and so I do want to step back and try something new just for a bit, but I will definitely come back to it, especially when I am feeling an itch for larger knitting needles again for a project that finishes really fast, because that's what the Tuscan sweater did. It knit up so fast, and it is so comfortable and warm and nice to wear, and so I would love to see what I can make with the same yarn combination. All right, I've got my hand on the scale. I've got the last of my drops yarn finally to show you. And then we're gonna move on to the other, and it's not nearly as much as the drops yarn, the other kinds of yarn that I have in my leftover yarn stash. So these first two are drops charisma. For the life of me, I can't remember where the first one comes from. I don't actually know how I ended up with this color yarn. I do know that this is from my stuffy. I made a little alpaca stuffy when I was first learning how to knit, because Amanda Barry makes very, very nice patterns for knit stuffed toys, I think. They're adorable, and they're all knit flat, which was so nice for me as a beginner, because I did not want to use double pointed needles. I still haven't to this day used double pointed needles. I will always magic loop it. Just because I'm irrationally worried of, because I've had this issue with a cable needle before, right, where I have held the needle and then all of a sudden gravity happens and the needle falls out and all of your stitches are just hanging there and you have like a mini panic attack. And I can only imagine how terrible that would be on a set of double pointed needles. So I've refrained from them, and I might have to break that fast soon, because I do want to knit a pattern that is specifically meant for double pointed needles and cannot be knit with magic loop. But I have avoided it so far, and I am very proud of myself for doing so. But yeah, I've got this Drops, the only reason I know that it's Drops Charisma is because it feels so much like this Drops Charisma. And this is Drops Soft Tweed that I used for my Soul Dog sweater. So this is, this has such a distinctive look. I didn't even need to keep the yarn label. And also I've only used soft tweed once, even though I am planning on using it again to make the Innis skirt by Knits from Oslo, which will be my first knitted skirt. So I'll be excited to report back on that. But I'm a bit hesitant to use Drops Charisma for anything that isn't a stuffy, just because I am not the biggest fan of superwash yarns. Because I've been burned in the past, I knit this cable hat in Charisma, and the first time I washed it, I didn't realize that superwash yarn grew so much when you washed it. So it's entirely too big for my head, and I felt so sad that at this point I'm like, well, I wouldn't use superwash yarn on something that I'm going to wear. I would much prefer to use something that I know, if it does grow, it grows like ½ a centimeter, and that's fine. But I can't knit something that's gonna like double in size when it's washed. Just because I would have like an absolute panic attack knitting it up, and then when it's blocked, I'm like, okay, well, I don't know. It's not very fun. I can't try it on as I go. There's just a whole bunch of things. But I do have these to use in like an accessory. Maybe I'll make some like placemats or coasters. I made a lot of coasters when I first started knitting, but I could do coasters. That would be like a nice little gift too, maybe, for my parents. I hope my parents don't watch my podcast. I don't know if they do. I don't know if they even know that it exists. I haven't told them. So if they find it, good on them. But yeah, I do have these in my stash. So let's see how much of it I have. So I'm just gonna call this orange. I've got 12 grams of orange and 14 grams of beige. So basically the same amount of both. So we've got 12 grams of orange and 14 grams of beige. So that could very easily make some nice coasters. Maybe with like some kind of an interlocking basket weave pattern, maybe like a checkerboard, chessboard kind of pattern with these two. That would be quite nice. They look very fall-y. Maybe that's just the orange and I think fall, but yeah, that could be nice. So maybe I will just say coasters by both of them. Yes. And the Drops Soft Tweed, I have 17 grams. And I don't know what I would combine soft tweed with, because it just has such a distinctive look. And like, I don't know. I can't really mix it in with the Nepal because I think it's the flecks. The flecks are the thing that like, it makes it look very, very different to other yarns. So maybe I just have to wait until I've finished my Innis skirt, and then I have some other leftover Drops Tweed, and I can maybe do something with both of those. Because that's like, I think that one is called Marzipan, the color. It's like a very whitish brown. So that could be nice with a yellow, because I'm sure there will be some left over. And if not, I am, like, one of the things I was planning on when I'm kind of feeling like a break from designing my own patterns and when I want to knit someone else's, and not test knit, but like, you know, just relax knit without a deadline or anything, is I was thinking about making the Ingrid sweater by Petite Knit in Drops Soft Tweed, maybe in like the light blue. I think that's a really pretty color with like the kind of the more turquoisey flecks in it. And so I might have some of that left over when that finishes, and I think like blue and yellow would be a really pretty combination if I wanted to knit like a hat or something with that. or I don't know. I mean, the thing that I love most about drop soft tweed is that it doesn't pill. It is very, from my experience, it's very, very pill resistant. So I would definitely take that into account, making whatever that I do end up making with it. So I don't know. I don't know what that would be at the end of the day. Do you think this would be a good sock yarn? I think there is some viscose in here. So I don't know. Have you made anything accessory-wise with soft tweed in the past? Let me know. Because I've only ever seen sweaters recommended for it, but nothing else. Well, skirts and sweaters, like big garments. But yeah, this is still looking for a purpose, but it will live in my stash until it finds one. Okay. The next group of yarns I have to show you guys is finally a non-drops group of yarn. This is very special to me because this is the first yarn that I ever knit with when I first started knitting. This is Fritids Garn, Fritids Garn, and I picked it because I was like, oh, this is very thick yarn. And I think I used it for 8mm needles, but you are definitely not supposed to. So I haven't washed that scarf yet that I made. I haven't blocked it, kind of, and so I am very hesitant to do so now because I knit it on needles that are much too large for the yarn, and I'm like, oh, but I want to save it and keep it for posterity. I don't want it all just falling apart. But yeah, I liked Fritids Garn a lot, so I ended up coming back to it and making other stuff with it, and I have used some Fritids Garn in the Meli Mellow sweater that I was talking about earlier. Fritids Garn is it's a very kind of, it's not itchy, but it's like a chain net type-ish. No, it's twisted yarn. It's kind of like two strands of yarn that are twisted together. And it's meant for use on 5.5mm needles. One skein is approximately 70 meters, so 50 grams, 70 meters. And I have a whole untouched skein of pink here that is quite nice, and I have a little bit of extra from when I made this little color block scarf that I'll show you a picture of. And I also have a bit of navy blue, which I think is almost a full skein, and some gray, and a little bit of the first color I ever knit with, this one, which I think is like a purpley gray is what I'm gonna call it anyway. So I'm gonna measure the pink first, and I've got one full skein and 10 grams. So I've got 60 grams of, I'm gonna call this Sunless Fritids, and I'll just call this pink. So I've got 60 grams of the pink, and I have 28 grams of gray, and I've got, let's see if this is a full skein, because I'm always wrong about that when I say this is a full skein. And I was wrong, it's 31 grams. I don't know why I look at something that's like more than 10 grams and I'm like, oh, a full skein of yarn. It's definitely not. But, you know, hey. And I'm gonna call this purpley gray. And it is 13 grams of purpley gray. So that is definitely the least bit of yarn that I have in that quality. So I don't know, I'm thinking this could be, like these two together, could be a pretty cute hat. If I used kind of like the pink by itself for the ribbing, and then I had kind of like, I don't know, maybe like some kind of like alternating, I could even do 1x1 rib where each one is a different color. Up the hat, kind of. I think that would be really cute, these two together. But I don't know what I would do with these. I could include them because I have used them with Drops Nepal in the past. I think this gray could fit well into the color panel that I showed before with the Drops Nepal, just because it's such a nice little neutral, and I think this could fit well too. I think it's very close to the beige that I showed earlier. It's just a little bit cooler is all. but I think as long as the two aren't close together, as long as this is with a more like neutrally white or black, which I have a bunch of, then it could work too, because this has just been sitting in my, I don't think I even used this for the Meli Melo sweater just because it was so far off from the other colors that were used in that sweater. But I think it finally needs a home, and I think that's where it's gonna go, is in with the Drops Nepal, whatever I end up making out of that. So I'm gonna designate the purpose for these two as hat, unspecified hat pattern. That will, I mean, all of these patterns, because I really enjoy making my own patterns. I just think it's kind of like, I don't know, figuring out what you really love and kind of those little design elements that make you happy. Like for example, when I'm making this hat, I would use an Italian cast on. And I haven't seen a lot of hat patterns that necessarily do, and then use 1x1 ribbon 2 different colors. But then I would definitely always release garment patterns for free, just because they're so low effort, and for me anyway, because I don't know, related to a sweater, it's just not something that I spend so much time on. And I would absolutely love it if other people could use them and if it were helpful to them. So yeah, a lot of these scrap yarns I think will be going into those kinds of patterns that will be released in the coming months, if anything sounds particularly interesting to you. Okay. So here, I've got a bit of a hodgepodge of yarn, because now we've started to get into like the brands of yarn that I don't really have a lot of it in my stash, because I've only used it for like a couple projects here and there. So my first yarn that I'm going to show you is, I want to say it's called Tweed Delight from Hobby, in the shade Pink Confetti, and I used this to knit my Adams Morgan sweater, and it was honestly, it was such a joy to knit with. I really like this yarn. It's the softest tweedy yarn I've ever worked with, and it's very cheery and colorful. It's got so many different specks of so many different colors in there. Like it's super pretty, and I think I have almost an entire skein left. So let's see exactly how much. Okay, 37 grams. So we've got Hobby Tweed Delight, which I forgot the E in Pink Confetti, and there's 38 grams of that. And I think it's about Drops Lima-ish gauge. There's 100 meters for every 50 grams. So this should be, if it's 38 grams, it's about 76 meters. And I think, I can't imagine pairing this with very many other kinds of yarn. I think eventually what might happen is if I have enough white yarn that's like a similar gauge to this, I think that would be really cute as like maybe a brioche hat. I think I could get a really cute brioche hat, or fisherman's rib, I haven't quite decided yet, out of like a white yarn, and this yarn is like a little accent piece. Kind of reminding me a little bit of if you've seen Clara Egger's The Fab sweater, which is, it's a very kind of fluffy brioche sweater that has We Are Knitters, yarnicorn and natural yarn in a brioche pattern. That would kind of be the vibe I would be going for with a brioche hat with this. Even though there are quite a lot of tweedy bits in here, like different colors, I don't think just choosing a color from it would be the way to go. I think it would just be too noisy. So I would definitely want something, definitely white. I don't think any other neutral would look good either. Black would be too dark. I think tan would look a bit messy. It would have to be white. So this is waiting for a very particular companion yarn to become a project. So I will just leave its purpose blank for the time being and put it aside, and it will sit and wait its turn. So next I've got, I want to say this is Viking yarn. little alpaca strum, which is like an alpaca, it's not a superwash, it's an alpaca yarn that I used to knit a lace leaf scarf thing. That was actually my first attempt at lace knitting. And actually, fun fact, or I guess fun little story as like a progression of my confidence and abilities as a knitter over the past 2 years, I was knitting this very, very simple lace leaf motif on a scarf with this yarn. And I was almost done with the lace motif, and I noticed that I had made a mistake a couple rows back, and I started frogging to fix it, and I couldn't do it, and I got so frustrated with myself. I just started pulling at the yarn, and I was like cutting the scarf, and I was like, oh my god, like I'm never gonna lace knit again. And I just finished designing, like, Davenport was my first lace knit camisole. So that was a year later. So that's kind of fun. It's fun to think about, like, I came from there. I couldn't figure out a lace leaf motif, and I cut it up and I left it for dead. And eventually I picked it back up and I did it and I finished it off. But it's kind of cool to be able to remember a memory like that and be like, wow, that feels, I would never do that now. But yeah, that's yeah. Happy little memories with this yarn. Happy, sad, bittersweet, but it's a special little yarn to me. And I have 8 grams of it. And I have to look this up because I'm not entirely sure what the grams to yardage is, but I think it's enough to be an accent color on something. Like I showed you the drops alpaca before, the 2 browns and the red from La Droguerie, and this might be a cute little accent color for that as well if it doesn't get too busy. Otherwise, it could definitely fit in with a kind of yarn like Drops Lima. I think it has the same thickness, so it could definitely be used in the same pattern as Drops Lima. So I will just put it in with those, and I will see, because I think the only problem with it is it's such a special color that it's very hard to fit into a color scheme. If it does exist there, it has to be like the one statement color. So it's going to be hard to find a palette, but I will find it a place. It will go somewhere special. And now we've got, it's so funny because I was playing Yarn Chicken with this yarn and now I have leftovers. This is the Rowan felted tweed DK that I used to knit my Menlo sweater, which is currently in testing. And I have 22 grams of it. It's crazy because I bought 6 skeins of Rowan felted tweed and I was like, oh, I'm gonna run out. There's no way I'm gonna get a whole sweater out of 6 skeins of this yarn, and I got it out of 5.5, as it turns out. So yeah, I've got half a skein of Rowan felted tweed in the shade Pine, and there's 22 grams of that. And I'm blanking a bit on the meterage, but I definitely should have, I think, oh gosh, I want to say 70 something, no, not 70 something, at least 50 meters in this. So it could, I think this is the same problem as the Drop Soft tweed. It's just very hard to find a place for this yarn because it is so distinctive and tweedy. But I'll just keep it with the rest and I'll see if it goes with any combination that I'm working with. But it's nice to know that I have it. It's a really pretty color and it's got such pretty little tweed bits in it. So I'm very excited to find a place to use this. And now we've got some yarn that I actually really, really love. This is from a local wool spinnery called Oslo Micro Spinnery. And it's called Pelsgull. It's like a very nice sheep's wool, and it's got, I don't know if you can see it, the light's kind of going, but it has this luster to it. It's almost like a gold luster. It's just, I think it's combined with some silk, so it gives it a bit of a shine. It's just very exquisite yarn. I used it to knit a balaclava number 2 along with a thread of Sunless Garn Tin Silk Mohair. And I have 31 grams of it left actually, which is a good amount. I'm just gonna call it Pelskul, I'll know what that is. So that's almost an entire skein of this yarn, which is super, super pretty. So it's definitely a warmer brown, and it has to fit with a palette of warmer colors. But I don't know. What do you think? Is this like, does this go together? I don't know. Or, I mean, these are all the same thickness, but they're just, the problem is, right, that they all have such different finishes because they're all such different fibers. And that's why it's so hard to kind of find something that they fit into, because when you have such unique when you have such unique yarn qualities, it's hard to mash them together and kind of, I don't know, make them work cohesively. It's like I don't know, I mean, maybe I'll have to order another skein of Oswald micro spinnery wool. In maybe a pretty like forget-me-not color, or like a really pretty cobalt blue, I think would look really nice with this chocolatey brown. So maybe I'll end up doing that and then make like a cowl out of it or something. I think that would be, you want it somewhere where people can see the yarn because it's so nice and pretty, and I think near your face is a nice place to put it. Okay, I've got some knitting for olive yarns to show you before we move into all of the mohair that I have. So I've got these two that are knitting for olive heavy merino. This one is in rose clay. I think it actually, yeah, it is rose clay. And this one is in soft aqua or powder aqua. I don't quite remember. But this was used to knit the Davenport camisole, and I used this in Lily Kate Makes' knit along for the one that I want crop. So I bought 2 skeins of each, and I have a little bit of leftover for both. And I think this one I even labeled. See, this is what I mean. I started being good. I measured out how much yarn I had, 18 grams. I put it on the little yarn label, and I put it back. So I don't even need to weigh this, because past Samantha already did it for me. So I'm gonna say KFO Heavy Merino in rose clay, and I've got 18 grams of it. And now in, I'm just gonna say aqua, I've got 13 grams of that. And I don't know, you guys, did these colors look good together? Because I'm thinking I might just put them together and make like, God, what could I make with this? I could make like a little scarf, like a little bandana scarf kind of, like a smaller one. Because this together is like, it's less than a skein of yarn together. So I would not get much out of it, but I could do that, possibly. So I might just do my best and try, and then if I run out, then I might just like pick up another skein of like a neutral base color, like maybe an off-white or something, and then just finish it off and then have this as like the border. And then I also have this Knitting for Olive Pure Silk. That's almost a full skein. It's 49 grams because I just used a tiny bit of it. And I used this in my olive sweater that I showed you in my first podcast. So it's, pure silk is very distinctive. I think I would have to hold it with more pure silk, or I can just use it on its own. It does have 250 meters in this 50 gram skein. So if you know any like one skein projects for silk yarn, please do let me know. I'm thinking right now it would have to be like a little bandana or something. Like that's what I could think of doing with silk yarn. But I really, this is a great, great warm weather yarn. So I don't want to make anything like mittens or hat with it because it's so suited for warmer weather and not so much for colder. Like it's not as great wool as keeping you insulated, but it's great for moisture wicking, for example. So I'm just gonna put that down in my inventory. KFO pure silk, and it's in the shade Olive, and I've got 49 grams of it. So a pretty good single skein project over here, and I will be combining these into something hopefully relatively soon. Oh. Okay, this is Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair. And the reason why I'm showing you the Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair separately from the rest of my mohairs is because I have 4 skeins of perfectly good soft silk mohair because I had to use 4 strands in my olive sweater. Like it called for just pulling out 4 strands of mohair. And I was not trying to do the thing where you like pull the mohair from both ends of the skein, because I was like, oh, tangles, that will happen so quickly. So I had to use 4 individual skeins. And then at the end of my sweater, I mean, I was almost done and I ran out of soft silk mohair. And then I had to use the last skeins that I had, each one of them. So now I have like 4 skeins, like almost full skeins of soft silk mohair left, which is a sweater quantity's worth of soft silk mohair. That's actually really good quality soft silk mohair too. Like this is luxury quality soft silk mohair from Knitting for Olive. It is super soft and just beautiful. So what I'm doing now is I'm looking for a merino, a Knitting for Olive merino to hold them with, because I don't want to use, I know that they have a dusty olive merino that is a perfect match for these, but I don't want another olive green sweater because I just made one. So ideally, I think what I want to do is buy maybe like the bottle green or something, like a bit of a brighter green merino that I can tone down a bit with the soft silk mohair, but also make like a prettier color. Or maybe I'll buy like a lighter green merino, like the Dusty Artichoke, for example, and hold it together with this and the color will be a little bit darker. Because I think that the merino and the mohair, they usually blend really well when you knit. It doesn't stand out like a marled yarn, for example. It just kind of like turns into a new color. So that is the plan for these 4 skeins. They're just waiting for some very pretty KFO merino. And I did the thing where I weighed and labeled them. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put that into my little inventory. So I've got KFO soft silk mohair in the shade Dusty Olive. And I'm just gonna do this formula. So we've got 19, 20, 18, 19, right? So that's 19 plus 19, yes, I can do math, plus 18 plus 20, and that's 76 grams, which is a lot of soft silk mohair. So yeah, I think I can get a whole sweater out of that with some merino. So that is the plan for these skeins, and they will not be mixed with any other soft silk mohair that I have in my stash until I have made that sweater, at which point any leftover mohair can go in with the rest of my mohairs. Okay, now we've got all the mohair rests in my stash. So these are all actually different kinds of soft silk mohair, which is interesting. I didn't actually think that I bought so many different varieties, but I did. This is Drops Kid Silk. I held it with the Drops Nepal, the like forget-me-not blue that I showed you earlier, to knit the Arrakis sweater or pullover by Joan Knits Things. And I still have, hello, it says 0 grams, that's not 0 grams. 0 grams, really? No? I think there's something wrong with my boyfriend's scale. 4 grams, okay. I was like, 0, invisible soft silk mohair. No, there are 4 grams of Drops Kid Silk left. So I've got Drops Kid Silk, and I think this is in the shade Jeans Blue, and I've got 4 grams of it left. So, barely anything, but still like 1/5 of a skein. So that should still be like 50 some meters of soft silk mohair, so that's not anything to laugh at, I don't think. And then I've got this Rowan plum, which is the same kind of mohair as the Drops Kid Silk that I used along with the soft tweed for Solo Dog. And I have 14 grams left of that, so quite a bit. So call that Rowan plum, and it's in yellow. And I've got 14 grams of it. And this is also Rowan plum. I held it with the Drops Witch to make the Salerno cardigan by the Knit Pearl Girl. And I still have a full skein of it, which is 25 grams and 250 meters. And I have a little bit left here too. I have 2 grams. It's like -1 gram. Something is definitely wrong. 2 grams. So all in all, I have 25 plus 27 grams, and Fritids Garn tin silk mohair that I held with the Oslo micro spinnery wool to make the balaclava number 2. And I have 10 grams of that. I'll just call Fritids tin silk in brown. Why do I even take it off the scale? I don't understand. I say the number out loud and I'm like, oh, that means I'll remember it. And then I go write stuff and I'm like, what was that number again? So I really should just leave it on. But yeah, and now it's saying 9, so I'll keep it as 9. And this is, I've got a ton of this. This is Garn tin silk Erla. Which is like an enormous, big, fluffy, I think it came in like a 50 gram skein, and there were like 800 some meters in it, because, was it 800? It might have been 400 something, I'd have to double check, but it was quite a bit, because this is a really thin kid silk, I think. This is their thinner variety, and it is just enormous. It's this huge, fluffy ball of kid silk, and I have 43 grams of kid silk in this ball. So this is like a sweater of kid silk right here. We'll call that Kid Silk Erla. I'll just call it burgundy. I think that is the color. It is burgundy and it's 43 grams. So here's what I was thinking, right? Because I was like, it would be really neat to make a mohair sweater. Like, you know, these colors. I think these colors work pretty well together. I mean, they're in my stash and they work. It's a little, I mean, you've got kind of, burgundy works with everything. I don't think I can be convinced otherwise. Burgundy is just, is neutral. Burgundy is a neutral. I don't know, it just feels like one. Navy blue is a neutral. Brown is a neutral. And I'm like, okay, maybe, I don't know. Maybe the brown doesn't work quite as great with this whole palette, but definitely these 4 over here, these 4 work pretty well. So I was thinking I would buy like a pretty non-fussy base yarn, like maybe Drops Nepal or something, like in an off-white, and I could do like a pattern where if you've seen like the spot sweater by Anna Wenzel, I want to say, she uses her mohair rests to make this very pretty kind of triangle pattern. And I was kind of drawing inspiration from that, except I was like, I don't like full mohair sweaters. So maybe it would be kind of cute to use like the same natural shade throughout, but hold it with different kinds of mohair and make like a pattern that way. Which could be interesting because I haven't seen that done before, but that, like, if I could swatch for it and it looked nice, I think like that could be a really nice sweater design. That I think as long as you had the right color combination, that could look really nice. And I mean, I have enough of this for sure that I could hold it with Drops Nepal like the entire way. So this could be like burgundy could be the main color, and I could have these little mohair accents in with, because I think, okay, all these colors, these 2 blues and this yellow would stand out really, really well against this burgundy. So I'm thinking about just making a sweater that does that. So those are my plans for that. So I'm just gonna, aside from the brown, I'm just gonna put down mohair. No, not mohair. Because I have another mohair sweater I wanted to talk to you about. So what do I call this? Nepal sweater. We're gonna call it that now. And I guess I will just have to know what that means. So yeah, I look forward to that. Okay guys, final stretch. This is my last group of yarns. They're what I call affectionately the fat mohairs. Because these are mohairs that are meant to be knit on 7 to 9 millimeter needles. And I've actually accumulated quite a bit of them because, as it turns out, I am a big fan of fat mohairs. So I have 3 different types here. I have the påfugl that I talked a little bit about in my last podcast, which I'm using right now to knit a white duster cardigan because you voted and I listened that it should be a long cardigan, and so it will be a long cardigan. But I have these leftover colors from it that I only use on the sleeves, and I wanted to make the whole body white. So now these are in my rest pile, along with a little bit of leftover from a sweater that I made in the past, inspired by Lina Ammo. So let's see, I've got this blue that I used for 2 sweaters now and still have leftovers. I've got 22 grams of it, so let's call this påfugl without the funny A, because that will just take too long, in blue. And it is, I haven't learned my lesson, 23 grams. And I also have påfugl in the shade gray. That is left over from a sweater and not the cardigan. And I have 30 grams of that. So quite a bit of yarn over here. I've got this pink shade. That is 32 grams. And this really pretty sunlight yellow shade. That's 39. Ooh, gosh. And the very small amount of leftover off-white, which is 5 grams. So that's påfugl. And I also have a little bit of Drops Melody left over from the Campfire Snuggle cardigan that I made from Drops. So I have this beige that is 13 grams. Let's call this Drops Melody in beige, and it's 13 grams. And I have this pearly gray from them that I have 16 grams of. And I also have 2 full skeins of worsted alpaca from Fritids Garn, which I just used to knit the Drop It Like It's Hot cardigan by Kara Knits Eng. So I'm just gonna say I have 100 grams of that because it's 2 full skeins of 50 grams each. And it's in the color, gosh, I think it's only the color code, but I'm just gonna call this lilac because it looks lilac to me. And I've got 100 of that. So what I'm thinking is I could very easily make a fat mohair sweater with what I have over here, because I have quite a bit, and they all work on 7mm needles, because 7mm is the low end for the påfugl. They say you can knit on 7 to 9mm needles, and 7 gives you a very nice kind of closed fabric that doesn't feel so airy. It's tighter. You can kind of wear it as a garment without any holes. And then worsted alpaca is recommended between 5 to 7, but I knit the ribbing for Kara's sweater on 6mm needles, and that felt kind of tight. So I think 7 would be really nice for stockinette. And then the Drops Melody, I think I held it double and I knit it on 12mm needles. So I think knitting it on 7's single would be perfectly fine. And I think some of these colors look pretty good together. I think this is like a good little neutral base for the sweater, and I think having like these kind of little shades sprinkled throughout would be kind of nice. I don't quite know off the top of my head how the yellow would look. I think it might be a bit much, but we will see. I mean, these are really cute. Anyway, oh, hello. I'm just gonna hold up the entire thing. I think this would be kind of nice. I don't know, and then you have, I can't really hold everything, but you've got the 2 neutral shades on the table as well, that I think would fit in quite nicely, and I think that would kind of give you, I know there's like a big 80s rush going on at the moment. Everything is kind of, which I'm all here for. I love bright colors, and I love the like prints and the shapes, and to a certain extent the fit. I'm not super fond of the kind of broader shoulders of it. I think that just doesn't look too great on me personally. If you can pull it off, honestly, I'm jealous. But I do like the colors. I like the like mix of colors that shouldn't work together but do. And I'm very excited to design something along those lines because I've been trying to keep everything kind of as minimalist as I can color-wise, because my big thing that I like is different stitch patterns and different structures. And I figure if you're experimenting a lot with those, then it's good to leave the color fairly standard. But I do want to do more color work, and I think leftover yarn would be a good way to kind of get started, because you have to just use what you have, so I can't kind of police myself a bit, you know? It's like, okay, you're going to use these wild colors and it's going to work because, I mean, you have them, so you're working with them. So we'll see what that becomes, but I'm very excited for that going forward. Last but not least, I wanted to talk about this. This is my, yes, it's in my hair now, what? Okay. This is my pile of absolute scraps, right? It's like you weave in your ends and you cut them off, and like this is what you end up with, right? Like this little scrappy stuff. And guys, I am such a hoarder. I don't throw anything away. So I end up with all of this and I'm like, I'm gonna use it. I promise I'm gonna use it. And my boyfriend is like, oh my God, it's getting everywhere. Like, please just chuck it in the trash. But I will not, and this is why. I get to win my argument by presenting my case. So I like to make little stuffies, like this little buddy over here, right? I made this little alpaca last year that I was talking about. Amanda Berry's patterns are amazing. And to do that, I use this, which it's a lot of stuffing, granted, right? But like, I do want to make stuffies for my little niece and nephew. And I want to make them fairly large. I don't want to make like, I mean, this is great for having around my house because like I don't really, he stayed on the shelf. I don't like sleep with him or anything. But I want to make them like cuddly stuffies. And I think it would use up a fair bit of wadding. And wadding is expensive. I don't know if you knit stuffies, but this bag was like 25 bucks. And if you are making larger stuffed animals, that is a lot of stuffing, and that's a lot of money that goes into those animals. So my solution, meet my new wadding. Because it's very, I mean, it's all like so plushy and nice, right? And so it's like you could easily just shove some of this into a stuffed toy, and like there you go. There is your nice, plushy, soft little stuffed toy wadding. And it's entirely free. It's stuff that you would have thrown away. So I'm going to be saving this in a little bag that's specifically for stuffed toy wadding, and I will use that when I make stuffies for my family in the future. And I'm actually very, very pleased with myself about this, you guys, because like I was going to, at first, I was like, oh, I'll save them and I'll make like one of those just tie knot sweaters by Let It Go Bad Good, which would be kind of exciting to do, but also I don't really want to knit like, I don't want to spend that much time and effort on a sweater with these scraps, but finding a great use for them and like replacing something that I would have bought in the store with my yarn scraps, that's great. Like, zero waste yarn. So that's my plan for my my very, very rests. Like, I mean, what are you gonna make out of this? You're gonna stuff a stuffed toy with it. Like, so I'm very pleased with that. Well, I really hope you enjoyed seeing and hearing about my scrap yarn. It turns out that I had a lot more yarn than I thought I had. But I have found, I think I've brainstormed a bit of a use for almost everything that I have in my stash. And if you saw something and it just like screamed a pair of socks at you or something, please let me know. I would love to hear your ideas on what to do with these scraps and how you've used your scraps before. Because I mean, I am a very new knitter, so I mean, these are like the first scraps I've accumulated, and I've never actually like kind of had to work down my stash like that before. So any and all tips are very, very appreciated. As always, if you like this video, please like and subscribe for more. And if you want to say hi, I'm over on Instagram and Ravelry and TikTok as the Strikkechick. And you can also find me on my own website, thestrikkechick.com. Until next time, happy knitting, bye!